There is a man sitting at the dinner table right now. Everyone around him is talking, laughing, arguing about something that doesn't matter, and he is sitting there, completely still, completely quiet, watching. He noticed the way his friend's smile didn't reach his eyes 20 minutes ago. He caught the moment the energy in the room shifted when a specific topic came up. He heard the small hesitation before someone gave an answer that was supposed to sound casual. Nobody else caught any of it, and he hasn't said a single word about what he saw. Most people would look at this man and think, he's shy, antisocial, maybe bored. Maybe he just has nothing interesting to say. Psychology says every single one of those assumptions is wrong. What is actually happening inside that silence is one of the most complex and sophisticated cognitive processes a human brain can perform, and the men who carry it almost never know what it actually is, because nobody ever told them. We live in a world that rewards the loudest voice in the room. The man who speaks first is assumed to be the most confident. The man who fills silence is seen as a leader. The man who dominates conversation is called charismatic, powerful, worth listening to, and the man who sits quietly and watches, he gets called cold, mysterious at best, checked out at worst. People ask his partner, does he ever talk? People at work assume he has nothing to contribute. People who don't know him decide within minutes that he is either arrogant or empty. But here's what modern neuroscience has discovered, and this will fundamentally change how you understand yourself or the quiet man in your life. The brain of a man who observes everything and says nothing is not less active than the people talking around him. It is working significantly harder. In 2003, neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman at UCLA began studying what he called the social brain, the network of regions that activates when humans process other people's emotions, intentions, and hidden meanings. What he found changed the field. When most people observe a social situation, they use a relatively straightforward pathway, surface processing. They hear words, and they respond to words. But a smaller group of people activate something different entirely. They automatically engage the temporoparietal junction, the medial prefrontal cortex, and the posterior superior temporal sulcus simultaneously. In plain language, they are running a full background analysis of every person in the room, reading microexpressions, detecting emotional inconsistencies, mapping the invisible social dynamics that most people never consciously register. This process is called hyperactive mentalizing, and the research shows it happens automatically, involuntarily, and constantly, whether the person wants it to or not. The quiet man at the dinner table is not absent from the conversation. He is processing it on a level nobody else in the room has access to. But here is where it gets genuinely strange. This kind of deep, observational processing does not appear randomly. Developmental psychologists have spent decades tracing its origin, and what they keep finding points to one specific place: childhood. In 1969, psychologist Eleanor Gibson at Cornell University published what became known as the visual cliff experiments. She discovered that children as young as 6 months old are already reading the emotional signals of their caregivers to determine whether their environment is safe. A baby on the edge of a visual drop will look at their mother's face. If she smiles, they crawl forward. If her expression carries any trace of fear, they stop completely. Gibson called this social referencing, the ability to read another person's emotional state and use it as survival data. Now here is the critical part. In homes where the emotional environment was unpredictable, where a parent's mood could shift without warning, where raised voices meant something was about to go wrong, where safety depended on reading the room before walking into it, children did something extraordinary. They trained this system to an extreme level. A child who needed to know whether their father was coming home in a good mood or a dangerous one before he even opened the door. That child's brain built neural pathways for emotional detection that most people never develop. They learned to read a room not as a social skill, but as a survival skill. And survival skills do not disappear when the danger does. Neuroscience has a term for this. It is called neural adaptation through environmental pressure. The brain physically rewires itself to meet the demands of the environment it grew up in. The boy who learned to watch everything and say nothing to stay safe became the man who watches everything and says nothing. Even decades later, even in rooms where there is no danger at all, his silence was never personality. It was protection, and it was built into him one quiet childhood evening at a time. In 2012, researchers at the Salk Institute for Biological Studies published findings on what they called depth of processing in social cognition. They found that individuals who score high on observational awareness don't just notice more, they process what they notice through more cognitive layers before generating a response. Where a typical person moves from observation directly to reaction in approximately 0.3 seconds, high observers run what the researchers described as a multi-stage internal simulation. They observe. They compare to past patterns. They model possible meanings. They consider consequences of different responses. They check for inconsistencies. And then, and only then, they decide whether speaking is worth what it will cost. That entire process can take minutes, and to everyone watching from the outside, it looks like nothing is happening. But here's what the data showed about the quality of what came out when these men finally did speak. Their responses were significantly more accurate, more measured, more emotionally precise, less likely to damage the relationship, more likely to actually resolve whatever was underneath the surface of the conversation. They spoke less, and when they spoke, it mattered more. There is a concept in linguistics called high signal-to-noise ratio communication. The idea that the most meaningful information is carried by the smallest number of words when those words are chosen with absolute precision. Quiet men don't speak less because they have less to say. They speak less because they refuse to say anything until it is exactly right. Now here's the part that stings a little. The same gift that makes these men exceptional observers makes them almost impossible to fully know, because the skill that reads other people so accurately also understands, at a very deep level, how much damage words can do. These men have watched words tear people apart. They have seen what happens when emotion speaks before intelligence can intervene. They have felt, in their own bodies, the weight of things said in the wrong moment that could never be taken back. So they hold back. Not because they don't care, because they care more than they know how to say. And here is the painful irony that psychologist James Pennebaker at the University of Texas documented after decades of research into emotional suppression and silence. The men who are most capable of understanding the emotional world around them are statistically the least likely to tell anyone what they see. They carry enormous amounts of emotional intelligence with almost nobody to share it with. They understand everyone in the room, and almost nobody in the room understands them. They are, in the most precise psychological sense of the word, the loneliest, intelligent people alive. Not because no one is around them, but because being truly known requires a kind of conversation most people around them are never equipped to have. For most of their lives, these men have been told, directly or indirectly, that their silence is a problem to fix. Talk more. Open up. Why are you so quiet? You seem closed off. You need to communicate better. As if the way their mind works is a defect. As if the depth of their processing is something that needs to be corrected into something louder, faster, and more immediately comfortable for everyone around them. But consider what would actually be lost if they changed. The friend who notices you are not okay before you say a word. The father who watches his child's face during dinner and already knows something happened at school before anyone speaks. The man in the meeting who said nothing for 40 minutes and then said the one thing that nobody else had seen, the thing that changed the direction of everything. These men are not broken versions of talkative people. They are a completely different cognitive architecture, one that human groups have always needed, even when they didn't know how to appreciate it. Anthropologist David Geary at the University of Missouri spent years studying what he called coalitional psychology, the way human groups naturally organize themselves. And what he found in group after group, culture after culture, across thousands of years of human history, was the same pattern. Every successful group had them. The observers, the ones who watched the edges of the firelight while everyone else talked. The ones who noticed the thing nobody else caught. The the ones whose silence was not absence, it was vigilance. They were not the loudest voices around the fire, but they were the reason the group survived the night. So tonight, when you sit at the table and the conversation moves around you like water and you find yourself watching, noticing the thing nobody said, feeling the shift nobody named, carrying the weight of everything you saw and chose not to speak. Understand what is actually happening. Your silence is not emptiness. It is the result of a brain that was built by experience, by necessity, by years of learning that words have weight and should only be spent on things worth saying, to see what most people will never see. You are not the man with nothing to say. You are the man who understood everything and chose, with full awareness, when to speak and when to let the silence do what words cannot. The world has always needed men like you. It just never learned how to tell you, and maybe it never will. But you already knew that. You saw it the moment you walked into the room.